You poor girl. You never had a head for success, my father said, shaking his head. His words echoed in my mind long after he'd said them. He had no idea what those words would set in motion. I remember that day so clearly. It was just another Sunday afternoon at the family's weekly gathering. Dad was in his usual spot, sipping his beer and bragging about the new lawnmower he'd bought for his landscaping business. He was so proud of it, like it was the best investment he'd ever made. I sat across from him, quietly picking at my food, trying to swallow the knot in my throat. You really should think about joining the business, Anna, he said again, as if he hadn't said it 1,000 times before. This tech stuff you're chasing? It's a fantasy. Women don't belong in finance, especially not in something as big as Wall Street. His words cut deep. It wasn't just the fact that he didn't believe in me. It was the way he had always seen me. I wasn't the daughter he hoped for. To him, I was just a girl who couldn't get things right. While my brothers worked alongside him, learning the ins and outs of the family business, I was the one who always seemed to be wasting time with my computer. The fact that I had started a small tech company, something he thought was too ambitious, too risky, was just more proof that I wasn't cut out for success. You're not meant for that world, Anna, he had told me a year ago when I first decided to start my own tech company. You've got to face facts. Women like you can't just waltz into a world dominated by men and expect to succeed. His words replayed in my mind as I excused myself from the table. I couldn't stay there, not with the tension growing thicker by the minute. I went to my car, locked the doors, and let the tears fall. But they weren't just tears of frustration. They were tears of determination. I had been working on an algorithm that could predict stock market trends. I spent countless nights hunched over my laptop while my friends went out and lived their lives. But the more time I spent working, the more it became clear I had something. I wasn't just a girl playing with computers. I was building something real. Something that could change everything. For weeks, I had been getting rejection after rejection from venture capitalists. They would smile politely, pat me on the back, and tell me I wasn't experienced enough. Maybe next time, they would say, and I'd walk out of their offices, my heart sinking a little more each time. But I refused to give up. I taped the rejection letters to my wall. Every no became fuel for my fire. I had to prove them all wrong. I had to show my father that I wasn't a failure. Then, one day, it happened. The email? The one that would change everything. I was sitting at my tiny desk, staring at the screen when it appeared in my inbox. Blackwater Capital interested in your algorithm. My breath caught in my throat. Blackwater Capital. The firm that had always been out of reach for someone like me. The firm that dealt in billions. They wanted to license my technology for $10 million. I stared at the email in disbelief. Was this real? I read it over and over again, each time trying to convince myself it wasn't some cruel joke. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Not yet. The next day, I signed the deal in New York City. I sat across from Patricia Donovan, the CEO of Blackwater Capital. She raised her glass to me and smiled. To the future of finance, she said. I clinked my glass with hers, my heart pounding. This wasn't just a deal. It was my ticket to proving everyone wrong. 2 weeks later, I was trending nationwide. They had just announced me as the youngest female founder on Wall Street. I'd gone from an unknown woman trying to make a name for herself to someone the world was starting to take seriously. I had done it. I had made it. But even as the accolades poured in, I couldn't forget the way my father had looked at me. The disappointment in his eyes. At the family reunion, I drove in alone. No one knew I was coming. I hadn't called ahead. Didn't want to give them the chance to prepare themselves. I pulled into the driveway of our old family house, the roar of the engine cutting through the silence. When the car stopped, I could feel their eyes on me before they even saw me. I stepped out of my car, the Ferrari Roma gleaming in the sunlight. My family was standing in a circle, chatting and laughing, but as soon as they saw me, they went quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of the engine still running, the air between us thick with tension. My father stood frozen, his hand still gripping the beer can, his mouth slightly open. He hadn't expected this. I could see it in his face. He never expected me to make it this far. He never thought I'd be the one to rise above his harsh words, to prove that a woman could make it in a world like Wall Street. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The silence said it all. "Anna?" My mother called from the back of the group, her voice uncertain. She was the only one who still had hope in me, still believed in what I could do. But I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I was standing in the place I had once wanted to prove myself, on my own terms. My father finally cleared his throat, breaking the silence. What's all this?" he asked, trying to mask his surprise with indifference. "I'm just here to visit," I said quietly, "and to show you I didn't fail." The words hung in the air as I walked past him, my head held high. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about showing him how wrong he was. It was about proving that success isn't defined by the work you do with your hands. It's about the work you do with your mind. As I entered the house, I couldn't help but feel a small victory. Not just for myself, but for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong, that they couldn't succeed. This was just the beginning. The days that followed my return to the family house were strange. It was as if a new version of myself had arrived, and nobody knew how to deal with her. I could feel their eyes on me every time I walked into a room. My cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone had heard about my deal. The media coverage had been everywhere. My father hadn't said a word to me since I showed up in the Ferrari. He hadn't even acknowledged my presence when I handed him the key, like I was still the girl who was never good enough. But even as the world seemed to cheer me on, there was something missing. I wasn't quite ready to let go of the past. The feeling of being overlooked, dismissed by the people who mattered most. That night, after the family reunion, I drove back to my apartment in the city, the flashing lights of the streets outside not quite matching the emptiness I felt inside. The deal with Blackwater had been a breakthrough, yes, but something still gnawed at me. I hadn't yet earned my father's respect. He hadn't looked at me like a real success. He hadn't looked at me like I mattered. And that was what I wanted most of all. His approval. But approval wasn't coming. Not from him. And it wasn't coming from the industry either. Just a few days after the announcement, I got a call from the managing director at Blackwater Capital. He was an older man, well-versed in the harshness of the finance world. "Anna, I need to be upfront with you," he said, his voice cool, detached. "We're reconsidering our licensing agreement with your algorithm. There's been some internal debate about the feasibility of scaling it the way we initially anticipated. We're not sure it's the breakthrough we thought it was." I could feel my heart sink. This wasn't the first time I had been rejected, but this one stung. I wasn't just being told no. I was being told that my work wasn't good enough. Again. "I understand," I said, trying to steady my voice. "But I've already demonstrated its success. The initial projections—" "It's not that simple," he interrupted. "We're talking about market shifts, changing trends. We need a more secure, tangible product for the kind of clients we cater to. I'm sorry, Anna, but we're going to need to pull back." My mind went blank. The words, the rejection, they weren't just business. It was personal. I wasn't just a number to them. I was someone who had poured years of my life into this. And suddenly I was nothing but another failed tech dream. "Are you saying you're backing out?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Look, Anna, I think you've got potential, but you've got to prove it in a different way," he said. "This isn't the right time. Maybe next year if you have a more refined product. But for now, this is where we stand." I hung up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the blank wall in front of me. It wasn't fair. I had worked harder than anyone. I had sacrificed everything to get here. And yet, It wasn't enough. I tried to shake it off. I told myself it wasn't the end. This was just one setback, and there would be more. But the feeling of being rejected, again, was suffocating. I didn't sleep that night. I spent hours researching every aspect of my algorithm, every potential weakness, every flaw. I ran it through new simulations, adjusted the code, and tried again and again to perfect it. I wasn't going to give up. I couldn't. The idea of having my father, having everyone, be right was unbearable. The next morning, I woke up to an email from one of the junior analysts at Blackwater. He was apologizing for the rejection, stating that it wasn't about the potential of my work, but the timing. That gave me a little hope. Maybe there was a chance to salvage the deal after all. I wasn't going to let the narrative of my failure become the story of who I was. But as the days went on, that lingering feeling of inadequacy didn't fade. The rejections kept piling up. Another firm turned me down. A second one said my product wasn't scalable. I was starting to feel like I was running in circles, trying to get somewhere but not getting any closer to the finish line. It was beginning to feel like the world was conspiring against me. And yet, somehow, my father's words from all those years ago kept coming back to me, echoing in my mind like a bitter truth. You never had a head for success. I knew what he meant. He had spent his life building his landscaping business from the ground up, using sweat and grit to create something tangible. I, on the other hand, was trying to create something invisible, something that wasn't even understood by most people. Was he right? Was I just chasing a dream that wasn't meant to be? But deep down, I knew something else. I had come too far to quit now. I had spent too many sleepless nights, too many hours alone in front of my computer, to let this be the end. That evening, as I sat staring at my laptop, I received a message from my cousin, Evan. He had seen the latest coverage on me in the media, and he wanted to meet. He said he had some big news for me. I wasn't in the mood to meet anyone, especially after the week I'd had, but something about his message made me want to take a chance. Maybe this was the break I needed. I agreed to meet him the next day, but little did I know, this meeting would change everything. The next day, I met Evan at the cafe downtown. He was sitting at a table by the window, his usual grin plastered across his face, but I could tell something was different. His eyes were more serious, more focused than I'd ever seen them. "You all right?" he asked, his tone quiet as he slid a cup of coffee toward me. I didn't answer at first. Instead, I stared down at the cup, trying to gather my thoughts. The rejection from Blackwater was still fresh, and the rejection from the other firms only added to the growing sense of failure. My vision for the future felt blurry, like I was walking through fog. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was at the edge of something, maybe even the edge of losing it all. I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired." Evan raised an eyebrow. He wasn't buying it. He leaned forward, looking at me with the same concern he'd had when we were kids, when we would stay up all night talking about our dreams, never thinking they wouldn't come true. We'd promised each other that we'd make it, that we'd show everyone we weren't just products of our small town. "You sure?" he pressed. "You don't look fine. You look like someone who's about to give up." The words stung, but he wasn't wrong. That's exactly how I felt. The weight of the world, of every rejection, every doubt, every voice that said I couldn't do it felt suffocating. My father's words haunted me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't belong here. Maybe I wasn't cut out for success. I exhaled, my shoulders heavy. It's just been a rough week. I've had so many people telling me no. Maybe they're right, Evan. Maybe I've been chasing a dream that was never meant to be. Evan's eyes softened and he leaned back in his chair. "Anna, listen to me. You're not the same person who started this journey. You've learned more in these past months than some people learn in their entire careers. If you quit now, it's not just about the business. It's about everything you fought for. You can't just let it go because a few people don't believe in you." His words hit me harder than I expected. But he was right. This wasn't just about tech or money. It was about proving something deeper to myself. I had come so far, fought so hard. And the idea of giving up now, of letting everything go because of a few setbacks, was devastating. What if it's just not enough? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Then you make it enough, he said firmly. You're stronger than this. You have the power to turn this around. His belief in me was the push I needed. I took a deep breath, wiped my face, and nodded. You're right. I'm not going to let them win. I've worked too hard. Evan smiled, the familiar glint of mischief returning to his eyes. That's the Anna I know. Now, about the big news. I raised an eyebrow. What's that? I've been talking to a couple of investors who actually get what you're doing. They see the potential. They think your algorithm can still be a game changer. They just want to help you rework it, build it into something more solid. They're ready to back you up if you're in. My heart skipped. Are you serious? He nodded. This could be the break you need. These guys are legit. They're not afraid of taking a chance on something new, even if it's a little risky. I sat back, processing the news. The words game changer echoed in my mind. I had been looking for validation from the wrong places, waiting for the big players to see what I was capable of. But maybe I didn't need them. Maybe this was the opportunity I had been waiting for. I'm in, I said, more sure of myself than I had felt in weeks. I'll take it. Evan smiled, relieved. I knew you would. You've got this, Anna. You just need to trust yourself. As we finished our coffee, I started to feel the weight lifting. It wasn't going to be easy. It never was. But I had one thing those other firms didn't: belief in my vision. I didn't need them to tell me I was capable anymore. I had come this far on my own, and now I was going to prove it. That evening, I sat at my desk, the same one I had used countless times before. The same desk where I had spent so many hours rewriting lines of code, where I had dreamed of this moment, the moment when it would all come together. I got to work. The days blurred together as I refined my algorithm, working late into the night, reworking every detail. This wasn't just about improving my product. It was about proving something to myself. I wasn't going to let this failure define me. I was going to show the world what I was capable of, no matter how long it took. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to San Francisco, meeting with the investors Evan had introduced me to. They were as eager as I was to get started, and as I sat across from them in their sleek downtown office, I knew this was the moment everything could change. The deal was small, at least compared to the ones I had dreamed of. But it didn't matter. I didn't need Wall Street's validation anymore. I had found my place in this world, and it wasn't going to be defined by the men who had told me I couldn't make it. The future was in my hands now, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. The flight to San Francisco felt like a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about the investors, about what this meeting could mean for the future of my company. I had spent years building this algorithm, pushing myself past limits I didn't know I had, but I still wasn't sure if I was ready for what this could bring. As the plane touched down, a wave of nerves hit me. This was real. This wasn't just a hopeful email or another rejection. This was a chance to turn everything around. I met the investors at their office downtown. Their sleek, glass-walled conference room was a far cry from my cluttered apartment. The polished table, the view of the city below, the cold, professional air. It all felt so out of reach. But here I was, sitting across from men who could change the course of everything I'd worked for. Anna, said Ben, one of the lead investors, a man in his 50s with an air of quiet authority. We've been following your progress for some time now. What we've seen is promising, and we think your algorithm has real potential. But you know how the game works. We need more than just an idea. We need to see the numbers, the proof. I nodded, trying to keep my hands steady. I understand. I've been working on refining the model. I've already made some adjustments based on the feedback I received. And we're ready to back you, Ben continued, leaning forward. But here's the thing. We're not just looking for another product in the market. We want something that can disrupt it. Something big. And we believe you're the one who can make that happen. I felt my heart beat faster. They weren't just offering to invest. They were offering a chance to change everything. But there was still a catch. There always was. We'd like to bring you on board with our accelerator program, Ben said. We'll give you the resources, the mentorship, and the network to scale. In return, we need equity in your company. 40%. I took a deep breath. 40% was a lot. It was more than I had ever anticipated giving up. But the value they offered, their experience, their connections, could help me take this to levels I hadn't even dreamed of. This was the opportunity I needed. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the chance to turn my vision into something real. I think we can make it work, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I'll need to ensure that the terms align with my vision for the company. I've been building this from the ground up. It's important to me that I maintain control of the direction we take. Ben smiled. We can work with that. We believe in you, Anna. You'll still be the one driving this forward. I felt a rush of relief wash over me. This was it. I had made it. The deal was done. The next few months passed in a blur of meetings, late nights, and countless calls with investors, developers, and advisors. The accelerator program was everything I had hoped for and more. With their support, I was able to scale my business faster than I could have imagined. I refined my algorithm, built a team, and expanded my reach. But as the business grew, so did the pressure. The expectations mounted. It wasn't just about proving myself anymore. Now I had a responsibility to the investors, to my team, to everyone who had believed in me when no one else would. Despite the successes, there was a nagging feeling that I couldn't shake. The doubt I had always carried with me. What if I wasn't enough? What if I couldn't meet these new expectations? What if I failed? But I pushed those thoughts aside. I couldn't afford to entertain them. I had come too far to turn back now. One afternoon, I was sitting in my new office in San Francisco, looking over the latest round of data. The numbers were good. No, they were better than good. But the reality of my father's voice, the one that still echoed in my head, kept creeping in. You're not meant for this world, he had said. You're just chasing some pipe dream. I shook my head. He wasn't right. This wasn't just a dream. This was reality. I was making it happen. It wasn't easy, but it was real. Just as I was lost in thought, I received a text from Evan. It was a screenshot of a news article that made my heart stop. Anna Langford, Wall Street's youngest female founder, shakes up financial technology industry. The article detailed the success of my company, the deals I had secured, and the rapid growth we were experiencing. It was the kind of media attention I had only dreamed about. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Investors, family, old friends. But it was the message from my mother that hit hardest. I knew you could do it, Anna. I'm so proud of you. It was the first time in my life I felt like my mother really understood what I had been trying to do. She had always been supportive, but her quiet belief in me had always been overshadowed by my father's dismissal. Now, for the first time, I felt like my mother saw me. She saw me for what I had become. Not just the girl trying to make it, but the woman who had. I spent the next few days working tirelessly, trying to prepare for the next big pitch. Investors were lining up, eager to get in on the ground floor. But despite the success, there was one thing I couldn't ignore. The price of all this growth. The more my company expanded, the more I felt myself drifting away from the person I had once been. The person who wanted to prove herself to her father, to her family, to the world. The further I moved into the spotlight, the more I wondered if I was still the same person who had started this journey in the first place. I had everything I'd ever wanted. The validation, the success, the money. But was it enough? And then, out of nowhere, my phone rang. It was my father. Anna, he said, his voice gruff. I've been thinking about you, and I think we need to talk. I stared at my phone, my father's name flashing across the screen. My heart beat faster with each passing second. For the first time in years, I found myself hesitant to answer. What did he want? After everything, after my success, why was he calling me now? I took a deep breath and swiped the screen. Dad, I said, my voice steady but guarded. Anna, he began, his tone softer than I expected. I've been thinking a lot about what you've been doing, about your company, and, well, I wanted to talk. I leaned back in my chair, the tension rising in my chest. About what? I want to see you, he said. It's time we had a conversation. A part of me wanted to say no, to hang up and ignore whatever he had to say. But another part of me, the part that had been trying to prove myself to him for years, knew that this conversation was inevitable. It was time for the reckoning. Okay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. When? Tomorrow, he replied. I'll be at your place. We need to talk face to face. I agreed, though a knot formed in my stomach. The last time we'd had a real conversation like this, it hadn't ended well. I knew this wouldn't be any different. The next day, I paced around my apartment, trying to steady myself. I couldn't stop replaying the last conversation I'd had with him in my mind, the one where he told me I wasn't cut out for success. It was his voice that echoed the loudest in my head, not the success I'd worked so hard for. When the knock on the door came, I was ready. I opened it, and there he stood, my father. The same man who had made me feel small my entire life. But now, he wasn't just the father I had struggled to live up to. He was the man who had finally come to terms with the fact that I had done it without him. Anna, he said, his voice hesitant as he stepped inside. It's been a while. Yeah, I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. It has. We sat down in the living room, the silence between us thick and uncomfortable. I could feel the weight of everything unspoken between us. The years of frustration, the disapproval, the missed opportunities for connection. Finally, he spoke. I've been watching you. The articles, the interviews. You're making waves, Anna. Bigger ones than I thought were possible. I stayed silent, unsure of how to react. The praise was unexpected. It wasn't the kind of praise I had dreamed of coming from him, but it was praise nonetheless. I wanted to believe it meant something, but a part of me wasn't sure. You've done well for yourself, he continued, his eyes searching mine. I can't deny that. I wanted to say something that would acknowledge his words, but it felt like the moment had passed. The sting of his past remarks was still fresh. He'd told me, time and again, that I would never succeed. Now he was saying the opposite. Was this his way of admitting he was wrong? But I still don't understand what you've done, Anna, he added, his voice growing more serious. I've spent my whole life building something real, something tangible. He paused, looking for the right words. You've built a company, yes, but it's not real to me. It's numbers on a screen. You can't touch it. You can't feel it like I could feel the sweat on my brow after a long day of work. That's real, Anna. I couldn't hold it in anymore. My anger flared up, the years of trying to prove myself to him suddenly boiling over. You think what I've built isn't real? I asked, my voice rising. You think all those sleepless nights, all those moments when I had nothing, no money, no support, that it wasn't real? He shifted in his seat, avoiding my gaze. I'm just saying, Anna, that there's a difference between a real business and a tech startup. What you've built is impressive, yes, but it's not the same as what I've done. I've provided for this family with my hands. I've given people jobs. You don't get that, do you? I get it, I snapped, feeling the heat of his words sink into my chest. You think what I've done isn't enough. You think it's just some game. But I've worked harder than you ever gave me credit for, Dad. I've spent every day trying to make something of myself, trying to prove to you that I am worth something. And now you're sitting here, telling me my success doesn't matter. My voice cracked, the weight of everything I had held back spilling out all at once. I never wanted to be like you, I continued, my eyes burning with unshed tears. I didn't want to be stuck in a job where I had to break my back just to get by. I wanted more, and now I have it. I didn't need your approval. I never did. My father was silent, his eyes locked on me, his face unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might leave, might walk away from me again like he always had. But instead, he stood up and walked over to the window. He stood there for a long time, his back to me, staring out into the city. I could see his hands clenching into fists, his jaw tight. Then, without turning around, he said, "I was wrong, Anna." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My heart skipped a beat as I processed what he was saying. "I was wrong," he repeated, his voice thick. "I never should have doubted you. I should have believed in you. I should have been proud of you from the start. I'm sorry." For the first time in my life, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. My father had said the words I had longed to hear, but I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to say something, but I couldn't. I didn't know if I could forgive him for all the years of doubt, all the times he had told me I wasn't good enough. But I knew this was a turning point, not just for him, but for me. I wasn't the girl I had been when I left Charleston. I had proved to myself that I was capable, that I was enough. I stood up slowly and walked over to him, standing beside him at the window. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for saying that." He nodded, his face softening as he looked out at the city. "I don't know if I can fix everything I've done, Anna, but I'm going to try. And I'm proud of you. I really am." And for the first time in years, I believed him. It had been a few weeks since my conversation with my father, and I couldn't shake the feeling that things had shifted between us. It wasn't an immediate change. He still had his pride, still saw the world through the lens of his own experiences, but something had softened, and that made all the difference. I had returned to San Francisco after our talk, diving back into the day-to-day grind of running my company. The investors were thrilled with our progress, the team was growing, and our numbers were through the roof. We were on track to hit even more significant milestones in the next year. But it wasn't just the business that had changed. I had changed. The weight of the doubt and frustration that I had carried for so long, the need for my father's approval had started to lift. The validation I had sought from him had finally come, but it hadn't been the end of my story. I had proven to myself that I was capable long before he apologized. The turning point wasn't the business deal, or the recognition, or even the Ferrari. It was that moment when my father finally admitted he was wrong. When he said, "I'm proud of you," it felt like a door had opened, and for the first time I was standing on the other side. I no longer needed to prove my worth to him or anyone else. I had already done that. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. Just when I thought I had it all figured out, my father called me again. "Anna." His voice crackled on the other end of the line. "I've been thinking about everything, about how things have changed, and I realized something. I can't do it alone anymore." I felt a strange sense of dread in the pit of my stomach. "What do you mean?" "I need your help," he said, the words laced with something I hadn't expected. Vulnerability. The landscaping business. It's failing. I can't compete with the bigger companies. I thought I could, but I can't keep up. I need your expertise, your technology. I need you to help me turn this around." I was silent for a moment, letting his words sink in. My father, the man who had never once asked for help, was now asking me. And something in me knew this was more than just about saving his business. This was about building a bridge between our worlds, combining what he had built with what I had created. "I can help you," I said, my voice steady. "But it's going to be a partnership. I'll bring my technology, but we're going to do this together. It can't just be about saving your business. It has to be about moving forward. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I understand, he finally said. I'm ready to learn, whatever it takes. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, planning, and strategizing. I flew back to Charleston, not just to visit, but to help. My father had agreed to bring his business into the digital age, to integrate the technology I had developed into his day-to-day operations. It was a huge step for him, a leap of faith. But as we sat in his office, surrounded by spreadsheets and old photos of the business, I realized how far we had both come. He was no longer the man who had belittled my dreams. He was the man who was willing to change. And I wasn't just the daughter trying to prove herself. I was his partner. We worked tirelessly over the next few months, combining our expertise, his in traditional industries, mine in technology. Slowly, we started to see results. The landscaping business began to turn a profit again, but it wasn't just the financial success that mattered. It was the transformation of our relationship. It was the trust we had built, the understanding that had grown between us. One day, as we sat in his office reviewing the latest numbers, my father looked up at me. I never thought this was possible, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But you were right, Anna. It's not about choosing one way over the other. It's about combining the best of both worlds. I smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. I'm glad you're seeing that, Dad. As we continued to grow the business, I found myself at the forefront of something new. Not just a financial technology startup, but a company that merged the traditional with the modern. We were making the landscape industry more efficient, helping local businesses thrive, and creating jobs in the process. My father's legacy was intact, but now it was something that could be passed on to the next generation. A few months later, we held a launch event to announce our new business model. It wasn't just a company-wide celebration. It was a family celebration. My father, who had once dismissed everything I did, was now standing beside me, proudly presenting our new direction to the world. I never imagined I'd be here, he said in front of our employees and investors, his voice loud and clear. But I've learned a lot from my daughter. It's time to embrace the future, and that future is now. I watched him as he spoke, a small but genuine smile on his face. It wasn't the approval I had once longed for. It was something far more meaningful, a mutual respect built on years of struggle, growth, and ultimately understanding. As we wrapped up the event and people began to mingle, I felt my phone buzz. It was a message from my mother. Your father's still not great with words, but he's proud of you. He just doesn't know how to say it. I smiled as I read the message. It wasn't the words I had waited so long to hear, but it was enough. It was a reminder that sometimes the most important things are the things left unsaid. As I walked outside to join the rest of the team, I saw my father talking to some of the employees. His back was straighter, his posture more confident. The man who had once told me I wasn't cut out for success was now leading his company into a new era. And for the first time, I didn't need to prove anything to him. I had already done it. It was the end of yet another exhausting week. The kind of week where I was lucky if I saw more than a few hours of sleep. I had worked 80-hour weeks for the past 7 years, all to build the company from the ground up. I was part of the reason we hit record numbers, the reason the team had been running smoothly despite all the hurdles. So when the email from the CEO, Michael Bennett, appeared in my inbox with the subject line, "Dinner invitation," a discussion about the future, my first reaction was confusion. I didn't know what to make of it. A dinner? For someone like me who had spent countless hours in the office, underappreciated and often overlooked, dinner with the CEO felt strange. I had worked for this company for 7 years, climbing up the ranks, and yet there were always rumors. Rumors about changes in leadership, about fresh faces coming in, about the board wanting to shake things up. Still, I never thought it would come to this. The email was short and to the point. I'd like to discuss your future with the company. Let me know when you're available. Dinner, perhaps? I stared at the screen for a moment. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, but I pushed the feeling away. This could just be a regular meeting, right? Maybe he wanted my input on the new direction the company was taking. After all, I had been at the center of some of our most successful projects. I had always given everything I had. I replied quickly, confirming I'd meet him at the restaurant in an hour. When I walked into the sleek downtown restaurant, I was greeted by the dim lighting, the soft hum of conversations, and the clink of glasses. There he was, Michael Bennett, CEO of the company, sitting at a table in the corner. His expression was unreadable, but the look in his eyes seemed distant, almost like he was preparing for something. "Ellen, good to see you," he said, standing up to shake my hand. His grip was firm but detached. I took my seat, setting my purse beside me, trying to shake the unease that had settled in my stomach. The waiter came by and took our drink orders. I declined a glass of wine, unsure if I even had the appetite for food at that moment. We sat in silence for a few moments. I could tell he was building up to something. Maybe he wanted to compliment me on my work. After all, I had done my best to keep everything running smoothly. Maybe he wanted to talk about a promotion, or perhaps discuss ways we could continue growing the company together. Finally, Michael broke the silence. "So, Ellen," he began, his voice calm but firm. "We've been looking at the company's direction. We've had some discussions with the board, and after reviewing things, it's clear that we need to make some changes in leadership." I felt the air leave my lungs. A slight tremor ran through me, but I forced myself to maintain composure. I had been expecting something like this. The rumors, the whispers, the sudden shifts in office dynamics. It had all been leading to this moment. He continued, "I've made the decision to bring in a new leader, someone who can guide us through this next phase of growth. You've been an incredible asset to this company, but unfortunately, your approach, it's just not the direction we want to go in anymore." My mind raced as I listened to his words, but I didn't let it show. This wasn't a surprise. I had seen the signs. I had been working too hard, pouring everything into this company, all while being passed over for new hires, new interns who didn't have the experience but had the fresh ideas. And now here it was. "We're moving in a new direction," Michael continued, eyes avoiding mine. "And with that, we've decided it's time to let you go. We're really grateful for everything you've done, Ellen, and I want to make sure you transition out smoothly." I blinked, trying to process the words. The finality of it. The casualness with which he said it, as if firing me was as easy as ordering an appetizer. "Well, I suppose these things happen," I said, my voice calm, almost detached. I had been prepared for this moment for months, maybe even longer. I had known for some time that the company was looking for a way to replace me. There had been subtle signs, my projects getting pushed aside, my opinions ignored, the new hires being given more responsibility, the whispers behind closed doors. I wasn't blind. The waiter brought our food, but I wasn't hungry. Michael took a bite of his food, seemingly indifferent to the gravity of what he had just done. I, on the other hand, couldn't help but feel a strange sense of calm wash over me. For years, I had poured my heart into this company, and it had taken everything from me. Now, here I was, sitting across from the man who had just decided my fate. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had already made plans. I had already reached out to our biggest client, Tech Global, and they were offering me a position, a high-ranking role, a role that would allow me to take control of their operations. And when I was offered that position, I knew exactly what I would do. Michael smiled, as if this was some sort of victory for him. "So, we'll have everything wrapped up by the end of the week. You'll get your severance, of course." I nodded, my mind already a few steps ahead. "I'll make sure everything's in order," I said, maintaining my composure. I wasn't going to fight it. There was no need to protest, no need to make a scene. I had already won, and Michael had no idea. The following days passed in a haze. After Michael's dinner invitation, I spent the next 48 hours tying up loose ends, as if preparing for a departure I had already accepted. I didn't feel anger, betrayal, or sadness. Instead, there was this strange calm. It was the calm of someone who had been playing a game for far too long and had finally won. But this wasn't about winning for the sake of ego. This was about control. Control over my life, my future, and the choices I had made. I packed my office with the precision of a strategist. I kept things simple. A few framed photos of my team, a few trinkets from long-forgotten conferences, and the leather-bound planner where I had documented everything I had ever done for this company. I didn't need reminders of what I had built. I had carried it all with me, quietly biding my time. By the end of the week, I was sitting in my car outside Tech Global's headquarters. The offer was official. I had signed the papers the night after Michael had let me go. They were ready for me to join their leadership team, to take the reins of the very department that I had once built from the ground up at my old company. It was everything I had worked for, everything I had wanted, without the politics, without the constant undermining. Tech Global had recognized my worth long before I had been fired, and now they were offering me a chance to prove it. I sat in the car, letting the weight of the moment settle in. In less than a week, I would be in charge. The reality of it was almost surreal, but it was also exactly what I needed. It was the perfect opportunity to finally take control of my own destiny, one that I had been denied for far too long. When I walked into Tech Global's office the following Monday, the atmosphere was different. The energy felt fresh, promising. It was the feeling I had once had when I first started my career, like anything was possible. I was introduced to the leadership team, most of whom seemed to have heard of me. Their enthusiasm was palpable. They had been watching me for years, waiting for the right time to extend the offer. The new role wasn't just about managing operations, it was about reshaping their entire approach. Tech Global wanted to dominate the market, and they wanted someone who knew how to build solid foundations while maintaining the flexibility to scale quickly. It was a challenge I was more than ready for, but there was something else on my mind, something I had been working on silently in the background. While I settled into my new role, I had been in constant contact with our biggest client, Chronotech, a company that Tech Global had been courting for a potential merger. The talks had been delicate. Tech Global wanted to secure the deal, but they hadn't quite understood the intricacies of Chronotech's operations. They didn't have the established relationship with Chronotech that I did. I had built that relationship over years of careful negotiation, trust building, and seamless collaboration. Chronotech had approached me long before I even knew I was about to be fired. They had recognized my value and had offered me a position as their chief operations officer. At first, I had hesitated. I didn't want to abandon my career at my current company just yet. But as the whispers of my termination grew louder, I knew that this was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. So I had reached out to Chronotech and told them that I would be joining them once the terms were finalized. Now it was all coming to fruition. I called Marcus, my contact at Chronotech, that morning. His voice on the other end of the line was filled with urgency. "We've been hearing some unsettling things from your old company, Ellen," he said. "They've been dragging their feet on the contract renewal, and now we're hearing rumors of an internal shakeup." I didn't flinch. "I'm aware," I said quietly. "But I think it's time we talk about moving forward with the deal." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "I'm officially free from my previous company, and we're ready to finalize everything." Marcus was silent for a moment. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. "Are you sure about this? The new leadership at your company? They're going to try to salvage this, right?" "They're going to offer you more." I smiled. "They can try, but the offer isn't on the table anymore. What they don't realize is that I've already made my move." I had already contacted the board at Tech Global, explaining the situation delicately and letting them know that I would be transitioning out as soon as the deal was finalized. The ball was now in their court, but I was in control. For the next 2 weeks, I watched from the sidelines as Tech Global continued to try and salvage the mess that had been created when I walked away. Michael and the new leadership team scrambled to keep things afloat, but it was clear that they had no idea how to handle the critical vendor relationships I had built. It wasn't just about Chronotech. It was about a web of partnerships I had woven, all of which were now on the verge of collapse without my guidance. But nothing could have prepared them for what happened next. The next few days passed in an almost surreal haze. I was at Tech Global now, settling into my new role, but the shadow of my old company lingered like a specter in the background. I had hoped that stepping away from the chaos would give me a sense of peace, but it only made the reality clearer. I had been undervalued and overlooked for years, and now I was in control of something far more powerful than I had ever imagined. But as my new team at Tech Global celebrated my arrival, the company I had left behind was starting to feel the strain. The phone calls, emails, and meetings I had quietly orchestrated were beginning to take effect. Every day, I watched as Michael and his team scrambled to handle the fallout. They were trying, too late, to patch things up with Chronotech and other vendors, but the damage was done. It didn't take long for me to receive the first call. It came from my old assistant, Derek, at my previous company. His voice was shaky, but I could hear the desperation underneath. "Ellen, I think we've got a problem," he said, barely able to contain his panic. "Chronotech just told us they're pulling out of the contract. They're saying they've received a better offer and that they're not moving forward with us. No warning. No nothing." I could almost hear the fear in Derek's voice. Chronotech was our biggest account. Losing them would send a ripple through the entire operation. But I wasn't worried. I had known this was coming. "Have you spoken to Marcus?" I asked, maintaining my composure. Derek paused for a moment, and I could tell he was putting the pieces together. "Marcus?" he asked, his voice faltering. You were talking to them, weren't you?" I smiled softly, though he couldn't see me. "I've been in touch, Derek. I had a feeling this was coming. And now it's just a matter of time before the rest of the pieces fall into place." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. I had done what needed to be done. The contracts were already in motion. The deal I had set up with Chronotech was official, and the terms had already been agreed upon. The shift in power had happened, and now the company was beginning to feel the consequences of their actions. Meanwhile, back at my old company, I could hear the panic rising. Derek wasn't the only one calling. The emails were flooding in. Vendors, partners, and clients were starting to question the sudden instability. The entire supply chain was beginning to crack. The company's once sturdy foundation was starting to crumble, and no one knew how to fix it. As the week progressed, the pressure mounted. Tech Global was waiting for the official announcement about Chronotech's departure from my old company. It was the moment we had all been waiting for, the final step in securing the deal. But I wasn't going to let them off easy. No, I had my own plan. The phone call came on Friday morning. "Ellen," Marcus's voice was tense. "We've just received word from your old company. They're trying to pull some last-minute tricks, offering a counterproposal. They're desperate. We need to decide if we want to accept or walk away." I leaned back in my chair, the cool silence of the office surrounding me. The decision was already made. "Tell them no. They had their chance. It's over." Marcus hesitated. "Are you sure?" I've never seen them panic like this before. I smirked. "Trust me, this is exactly what I wanted." Later that day, the emails started to come through. First, it was an internal memo from Michael, apologizing to the team for the abrupt changes and the loss of key clients. Then, the public statement hit. The company was in damage control mode, trying to spin the situation in their favor. But the words were hollow. It was too late. Tech Global's client base had already begun to grow exponentially. The deal with Chronotech was only the beginning. I was already fielding calls from other companies that had been waiting for the right opportunity to jump ship. And with every new contract signed, the hole my old company had dug for itself grew deeper. By the end of the week, I knew the game was all but over for them. They had tried to replace me, thinking I was expendable. But what they didn't realize was that I had built everything: the contracts, the relationships, the strategy. They couldn't replicate it, not even with all their new interns and fresh faces. The truth was, they needed me more than I needed them. And as I sat back in my new office, watching the whirlwind of activity unfold, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't about rubbing their faces in their failure. It was about something deeper. It was about the quiet power of knowing your worth, the power of standing up for yourself when no one else would. I had played the long game, and now it was paying off. I had rebuilt my career from the ground up, and in the process, I had built something stronger than the company I had left behind. Tech Global was mine now. But more than that, my future was in my hands, and I wasn't about to let go of it. 2 weeks had passed since the shockwaves of my departure had hit my old company, and I could feel the world shifting beneath my feet. The initial relief I felt upon walking away from the chaos was starting to fade, replaced by a quiet but persistent unease. Yes, I had secured my future with Tech Global, and yes, I had taken control of the situation with Chronotech. But as the deals rolled in and the deals my old company had taken for granted slipped through their fingers, the reality of it all hit me. I had lost everything I had built. And yet, I hadn't. My phone buzzed, bringing me back to the present. It was a message from Clara, one of the few people who had truly believed in me at my old company. She had been in the trenches with me, had witnessed the long hours, the sacrifices, and the eventual, inevitable breakdown of everything I had worked for. She had also seen the way Michael and the new leadership had treated me, like I was replaceable, dispensable. "They're losing it, Ellen. The whole team is in turmoil. Michael's scrambling to make nice with clients, but the damage is irreversible. How does it feel to watch it all fall apart?" I stared at her message for a few moments. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. After all, I had been dismissed with nothing but a few polite words and a severance package. I had been treated like an afterthought, a cog in a machine that could be easily replaced. But seeing the aftermath, seeing how everything I had built was unraveling without me, felt different. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure. I texted back, "It's not about winning, Clara. It's about moving forward. It's about knowing that what I did had value, even if they never saw it." I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet hum of the office settle around me. At Tech Global, things were moving at lightning speed. We were scaling faster than I had ever imagined, and with every new partnership, with every new deal, I could see how much I was needed. But that wasn't what was on my mind now. The truth was, I hadn't expected to feel this hollow. I had planned every move meticulously, but the emotional cost of walking away from everything I had known was becoming clearer by the day. I had sacrificed friendships, trust, and loyalty. I had made my peace with it, but now I was wondering if that peace would last. As I sat in the conference room later that afternoon, going over the latest metrics with my team, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. We were growing fast, yes, but I hadn't truly built the kind of company I wanted to lead. Not yet. "Ellen," Marcus's voice broke me from my thoughts. He was Tech Global's COO, a no-nonsense kind of guy who never let anything slip by without his notice. He had been instrumental in securing some of our biggest deals, but today his expression was different. Tighter. "We've got a problem." I raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" "It's your old company," he said, not mincing words. "They're circling back. They're trying to get a meeting with you. Michael's involved. He's asking if you'll come back. They want you to lead their restructuring efforts." I froze. I hadn't expected this. I had assumed that once I left, they'd never look back, that they'd be too busy trying to patch the holes I had left behind to even think about offering me a chance to return. But here it was. They were asking for me. It was an offer I couldn't have imagined 2 weeks ago. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. The offer was tempting. I could go back, fix what had been broken, prove to them that they had made the biggest mistake of their lives by letting me go. I could take control of everything, reclaim the legacy they had stripped from me. But at what cost? "No," I said quietly, the answer coming to me before I even realized it. I'm not going back. Marcus looked at me, surprised. You sure? This could be the perfect opportunity to fix things, make things right. You were their backbone, Ellen. I shook my head. It's not my fight anymore. They had their chance. They made their choices. Now I make mine. The words were final. I could feel the weight of them, but there was something freeing about saying them aloud. The company I had once believed in, the company I had given my all to, had chosen to discard me when I was at my peak. They had chosen to let me go when I was essential to their success. Now they wanted me back, but I had already moved on. I looked out the window, watching as the sun dipped below the skyline. The transition from one chapter to the next wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had made my mark at my old company, but now I was building something better, something stronger. I was building a team that valued me, that saw my worth, and I was ready to take them all to new heights. But Michael's call, the offer to return, lingered in the back of my mind. It was a reminder of everything I had left behind, and everything I had gained in return. It was a test of my resolve. I could have gone back. I could have taken their offer and shown them that they had made the wrong choice. But I didn't need them to prove my worth anymore. Tech Global was mine now. I wasn't just a cog in their machine anymore. I was the one steering the ship. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Clara. You did it, Ellen. You built something they could never take from you. Tech Global's about to explode, and they're going to wish they never let you go. I smiled, not because I was reveling in their failure, but because I had learned something invaluable. You don't have to fight back with anger. Sometimes the best revenge is success. The morning after the meeting with Marcus, everything seemed to click into place. The relief I had been expecting after rejecting the offer to return to my old company never came. Instead, there was an overwhelming sense of clarity. I didn't need to go back. The door was closed. Now, I had something better. Control. Tech Global's board had fully backed me since I joined. Their support had been unwavering, and the recent surge in the company's stock price only reinforced the fact that the path I had chosen was the right one. But what really settled in me was the power I had to build something that wasn't just for me, but for the team that had followed me. They had believed in me, and now we were about to make our mark on the industry. Yet even as I marveled at how far we had come, I knew something was missing. There was still a piece left to put into place. The final piece of the puzzle that would secure my new role in the industry and leave no doubt that I had made the right decision. Chronotech. Our relationship had been established long before I left my old company. When I first started at Tech Global, I knew that securing Chronotech as a client would be a game changer. We had already been in talks, but it was clear that my old company had mishandled the relationship. They had taken their success for granted, assuming that loyalty and years of partnership would automatically translate into continued business. But loyalty wasn't enough, and they were about to learn that the hard way. It was time to finish what I had started. I had already spoken to Marcus about moving forward with the deal. Everything had been put in place, but there was one more step. I needed to speak with Chronotech's leadership directly. The call was set for 2 p.m. that afternoon. I walked into the conference room, feeling the familiar weight of anticipation. I had handled so many negotiations like this in the past, but this one was different. This was the final step in asserting my independence. This was my chance to show Chronotech just how much value I could bring to their operations, and in turn, show the world just how much value I had been offering all along. When the call connected, I was greeted by the familiar face of Marcus, and beside him, the CEO of Chronotech, Peter Caldwell. He looked every bit the part, polished, confident, and a little weary, as if he had been through the motions of these calls too many times before. Ellen, good to see you again, Peter said, his voice warm but measured. Likewise, Peter. I hope everything is going well on your side, I replied, leaning forward with a smile. Things are moving fast here, Peter said. We're really excited about the future. Your proposal has been carefully reviewed, and we're ready to move forward. I could feel the power shift. It was subtle, but it was there. Tech Global was now on the verge of locking in a deal with Chronotech that would not only position us as a key player in the tech industry, but it would also solidify my position in the company. This wasn't just about the financials. This was about establishing Tech Global as the true leader in innovation, and I was the one driving that vision. "We're ready to discuss the terms of the partnership," I said, focusing on the objective. "But before we do, I think it's important to ensure we're aligned on our goals moving forward." Peter nodded. "Absolutely. We've been watching your growth at Tech Global. It's clear that you have a vision, and that's exactly what we need in a partner." "We both know how critical Chronotech is to Tech Global's next phase," I replied. "That's why I've taken the necessary steps to ensure this partnership is one we can both depend on. The terms are more than fair, and we're ready to make it official." I wasn't exaggerating. Chronotech's proprietary technology was integral to Tech Global's upcoming AI-powered operations hub. Without it, we would be looking at a long road ahead, with setbacks that could delay everything by months. But with this deal, we had the power to move forward immediately. And it wasn't just about the software. It was about aligning our brands, our goals, and our values. After a few more minutes of discussion, we had hammered out the final details. Chronotech was on board, and the deal was ready to be finalized. The tension that had been building between the two companies over the past few months had melted away. "We'll send over the contracts for signatures later today," Peter said, his tone firm. "This is going to be a great partnership, Ellen." "Looking forward to it," I said, keeping my voice steady, though inside I could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another deal. This was the culmination of everything I had worked for, proving to myself, to Tech Global, and to everyone who had ever doubted me that I was worth more than I had been given. The call ended, and I sat back in my chair, letting the realization wash over me. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The final piece had fallen into place. And as I looked out the window at the bustling city below, I knew that my journey was just beginning. But even as I prepared for the next steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that Michael, my old CEO, was still watching from the sidelines. He had fired me. He had thought he could replace me. But what he didn't realize was that I had been the one holding the company together. And now, as Chronotech's new partner, I had positioned myself to be the one to shape the future of the industry. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Tech Global was on the rise, and my role in securing the partnership with Chronotech had cemented my place as one of the most powerful people in the company. The growth was undeniable. Deals were being signed, new clients were flocking to us, and every day I saw the results of the groundwork I had laid. But even as the success built around me, there was a quiet sense of reflection that never left me. When you get everything you want, everything you've worked for, it's not the victory that stays with you. It's the cost. The people you leave behind, the relationships you've sacrificed, and the weight of the choices you've made. I had risen, and I had done it on my terms. But now, as I stood in my office, looking out over the city skyline, the question I had been avoiding was finally pushing its way to the forefront of my mind. Was it worth it? The phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Clara. "Ellen, you're not going to believe this," she said, her voice urgent. "I just heard from Derek. They're officially announcing Michael's exit from the company." I froze, the words hitting me like a punch to the gut. Michael, the man who had fired me in that cold, dismissive dinner, was being removed from his position. The very man who had thought he could discard me like an old file was now being shown the door. "Does it surprise you?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. "I don't know," Clara said. "Maybe not. But it's the way it happened that's interesting. The board pulled the trigger. And you know why? It's not just the Chronotech deal. It's the fact that he couldn't keep the company afloat. The vendors are dropping off, the financials are in the red, and everyone's pointing to him as the cause." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of it all. I had spent so long focusing on building my own future that I hadn't thought much about the fallout. But as I looked at the news unfolding before me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. Michael had underestimated me. He had underestimated my ability to not only survive, but to thrive. Still, the feeling was not as sweet as I imagined. There was no triumph in watching someone else fail, no satisfaction in their downfall. It was as if the power I had fought so hard for felt a little emptier now that I could see the consequences of my success. "Do you think this is over?" Clara asked, interrupting my thoughts. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I'm not going to sit around waiting for it to happen. I'm done looking back. My future is here. Now it's time to look ahead." I ended the call and stared at my reflection in the glass window. The woman staring back at me was different than the one who had left my old company months ago. She was sharper, more composed. But the scars of my journey were still there. Quiet reminders of everything I had to give up to get here. The next few days were a blur of meetings, press releases, and constant updates about the internal shakeup at my old company. The media was buzzing, reporting on Michael's sudden exit and the dramatic restructuring that was underway. It was the kind of corporate drama that made headlines, but the real story was deeper than what the public could see. For me, it wasn't just about my old company losing control. It was about what I had built in its place. Tech Global, my new home, my new foundation. And as the days went on, I realized that the true cost of my success wasn't just measured in professional terms. It was personal. At the end of the week, as I prepared to board a flight to a global conference where I would be presenting Tech Global's new vision to industry leaders, I got a message from Michelle, our legal advisor at Tech Global. It was a formal email from the board of directors at my old company. "Dear Ellen, we regret to inform you that we have reconsidered your previous offer to return. We acknowledge the value of your contributions to the company and would like to apologize for the manner in which your departure was handled. We would be honored to discuss the possibility of your future involvement with us. Sincerely, the board." I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. After everything that had happened, after they had pushed me out, humiliated me, they were now asking for my help. But instead of feeling triumphant, the email left me feeling nothing. I wasn't interested in going back. I had moved forward, and that chapter of my life was closed. I was no longer seeking validation from a company that had once been my entire world. I had built something better, something that was mine, with no need for their approval. As the plane took off, I looked out the window, feeling the weight of everything I had gained. I had lost so much along the way, but in the end, I had found something more valuable. I had found my true worth. And that was something no one could take away. When the flight landed, I was met by my team, excited for the future, eager to make their mark. And as we walked into the conference, ready to showcase the future of Tech Global to the world, I knew that I had finally arrived. Not as a product of my past company, but as the creator of something new. I didn't need them to define me anymore. I was defining myself.